Hello, and welcome to the Modern Industrialist Xchange podcast, where we explore the innovations and strategies driving industrial progress forward. My guest today is Amish Chadha, Chief Risk Officer at Helpful Engineering. Helpful Engineering is a nonprofit that brings together engineers, operators, researchers, students, and volunteers from around the world to solve real-world challenges through open source engineering. The organization was born during the early days of the pandemic, when a small group of people came together online looking for ways to help address shortages of PPE, ventilators, and other critical equipment. What started as a handful of volunteers quickly grew into a global community of thousands. In this conversation, Amish shares the origin story of Helpful Engineering and what they've learned about innovation, collaboration, and problem solving over the last 6 years. We talk about why building physical products is often much harder than people realize. We explore the role open source communities can play in accelerating innovation. And we discuss why so many supply chain failures aren't just caused by physical disruptions, but by gaps in information and visibility. We also get into a theme that really stuck with me. It's this idea of the difference between building products and building builders. If you're interested in manufacturing, supply chain, engineering, or how diverse groups of people can come together to solve difficult problems, I think you'll enjoy this conversation. Let's get into it. Amish, welcome to the Modern Industrialist Xchange podcast. It's great to have you on today.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So we first met through some common friends and associates at the Granger College of Engineering at the University of Illinois. You were there representing a variety of different viewpoints. You have such a multi-touch engagement with the industrial space. One of the ones that stood out to me and what I wanted to talk to you a bit more about was the work you've been doing with Helpful Engineering as their Chief Risk Officer. So before we get into the work itself, I would love it if you could just help the audience understand what Helpful Engineering actually is and how you would describe it as a platform for open solution generation, and just what does that mean in practice?
Sure, absolutely. We talk about open solution generation. These are words that people don't easily reconcile with. Open source as a concept is something that has been around for a few decades now, but more commonly perceived in the software domain, not so much in things to do with hardware and things that people want to build. I think the simplest way to say what that means is we're the connective tissue. We're not the factory. We organize talent, we organize resources, we organize production capacity so that good engineering ideas can actually reach the people who need them. We were a registered US 501c nonprofit. Our mission is deliberately broad. If you look at our mission statement on our website, we talk about delivering openly engineered solutions everywhere. And to us, that means we're doing our part to inch toward a world where better access to resources and opportunity ultimately compounds into innovation, stability, and prosperity. And really what we're about is trying to say, can we identify and address all the various frictions to innovation that people see? One of the things that really stands out is everybody has an inner builder, but it is incredibly hard to build things. And it doesn't matter whether you don't have any technical skills or whether you are perhaps one of the most technically gifted engineers out there. The actual aspect and the actual process of building something, designing something, is an incredibly arduous and long-winded process that people go through. Anybody can sketch on a piece of paper, and that's one tiny element of the wider process. But to build a prototype, get it to the stage of saying, this is now a reference design, and you can take this, Jason, and you can build this yourself, that takes a lot more effort. That takes a lot more work. For the organization itself, both I and the organization met somewhat timely in March of 2020. Height of the pandemic, you're in New York, there are bodies piling up outside hospitals across Cedars-Sinai and whatnot. There's a lot of people online frustrated looking at the supply chain crisis. We're out of PPE, we're out of machines. Healthcare is broken. Nobody really knows what's hit them. These are folks that are, the best way to classify them as humble heroes. Honest, hardworking people, sincerely wanting to do something to make a difference. Some of them were engineers, some of them were scientists, some of them were doctors, some of them had no scientific background whatsoever. We want to be useful, we want to do something. We probably had about 19 people on Reddit. And they said, you know what? let's just go on to this new platform called Slack. Let's open a channel. It'd be easy for us to communicate. This is getting a bit too difficult to follow. 19 people became just over 1,000 people in a month. In 3 months, we were almost 10,000 people. By month 6, we were crossing the 19,000 mark of people that were coming into this Slack community.
What was the disparity of different backgrounds and skill sets and motivations that bubbled up in that community as it grew? I get the sense that there were a lot of people coming to it with different abilities, and just go a little bit deeper on that if you could.
We had high school students, we had retired people, engineers, mechanics, artists, janitors, businessmen, wives that were looking for something extra to do, but said, well, I can sew, I can do something or the other. What do we need? Right? Tell us what we need. A lot of the emphasis was on respiratory devices. The organization started one saying, look, we don't have enough face masks. We don't have enough PPE. N95 is out of the question. Can we build a ventilator? We're short of ventilators. Can we build artifacts that would allow us to split ventilators so that more than one patient can use a ventilator at the same time? I got involved via the World Health Organization, and immediately they're like, oh, okay, so we need you to look after our product portfolio of ventilators and respiratory devices, which at the time, amazingly, was some 100 projects plus wide. And immediately what struck me was, wow, how ambitious. And then, oh my God, what are we actually trying to do here? It struck me that, people's level of understanding of biomedical engineering and how things work was so basic, and saying, well, how hard could it be? But the idea that you could take a ventilator design, reverse engineer it, do some testing, and then say, okay, look, I got a prototype, and go to a hospital and tell a doctor to start using it on the patients urgently because they needed it, that was quite naive. It took a long time to get people up to speed to say, look, there is a curve that we have to follow here from a good design practice if we intend to have any patients using this. It was also fascinating to learn what starting points people were going from. How did you come up with the design for this? And a lot of them were actually existing designs that had been made open source. A lot of people don't know this, but NASA actually has a lot of designs from the early 60s when they were launching the Apollo missions. And what ends up happening is the moment a design doesn't work, they go back to the drawing board. But those designs that were left on the floor eventually become open source to the point at which you can use them, provided you can find a way to build something and fork that design and improve upon it. You could do something with it.
Yeah, I love the idea that there were probably nuggets of fantastic ideas in those otherwise discarded plans, that with the passage of time, with the collaboration of different people, with new material sciences, a new twist on that could be made useful in different ways to fit the current need and the current operating environment.
Yeah. And, that origin taught us the first lesson. In a crisis, there is capacity. People who never imagined themselves as contributors became designers, coordinators, testers, translators, and builders, most importantly. And the talent was always latent. What was missing, and what is always missing, is a mechanism for that talent to find meaningful work. And building that mechanism is what Helpful does, in a nutshell. Our work flows from the community in 3 ways. You either bring an idea of your own, they join a project that's already in motion, or they bring an external project to help to accelerate it. The on-ramp is made intentionally simple. We say, join our Slack, tell us what you can offer, and you get matched to a project or you start your own. Everything built in the community is released under an open source license and lives in open repositories. So any solution can be replicated, improved, and manufactured everywhere. Our goal is to ensure that if there's a concept, we can get it through our PLM lifecycle at Helpful, which ensures that you've got good engineering documentation that is maintained at a minimum standard of quality. There's a prototype, there's a BOM, there's specifications, there's an engineering design. If you wanted to pick it up tomorrow, Jason, you could say, okay, if I wanted to build that particular prototype that these guys have put on in the library, I know how to go build it. I know what materials to use. I know what specification and gauge of those materials is required. I'm also told These are things that were not tested for. These are materials that have not been tested for substitutability. And that becomes a very important point from a risk element, because the idea is to help improve know-how and knowledge, but it's not to say that you can now take this in a crisis zone and expect for it to have all the same results. Our goal is to get to a point of reproducibility and repeatability, but context engineering matters. I'll give you a live example. Further down in 2020, when they were trying to send ventilators and oxygen concentrators to India, there was a huge drive in the United States. India had next to no biomedical manufacturing capacity. They collected hundreds and thousands of pieces of equipment, all of which was specially cargoed and shipped to New Delhi. When it got to New Delhi, the government basically set it up in a airport hangar, saying, well, we're going to distribute this equipment centrally to different cities and hospitals that need it the most. So, okay. What they realized within a week was much of the equipment that had come in had gone bad, had damaged, and was no longer fit for purpose. And the reason why was, if you look at an oxygen concentrator and if you look at the components within it, you've got lithium. The lithium reacts to the environment and the humidity levels around it. So by the time that oxygen concentrator was exposed to the atmosphere in whatever location it was in, it had effectively turned to cake, which meant it's defunct. You can't use this on a patient. And that sparked its own reverse engineering methodology, whereby we started working with other maker communities in India that were in the process of trying to build their own nascent oxygen concentrators and devices. We spoke to Amazon, we spoke to Tata, we spoke to a bunch of other Indian conglomerates saying, look, let us put you in touch with the maker communities that have built these open source designs. These perhaps could be the starting point for you to build your own machine. Fork a design, take it forward. You've got smart people on your payroll that can help do this. There's a shortage of supply and people need it. A lot of people don't realize what happened during the crisis in Italy when they ran out of supplies. There were people from the helpful community who had emailed across and sent FTP links across to all the 3D printed designs for some of the consumables that they could 3D print for syringes and beakers and stuff that they no longer had in supply, but they needed out there. There was a COVID tracker that was going around WhatsApp that was basically counting the death toll and the number of cases. That originated from Helpful as well. There was a community project with Johns Hopkins, which ultimately led to an analytical dashboard that went viral across the world in a matter of seconds. The one we're particularly proud of that originated from the community was a face shield project, which actually got us on the map on Vox and New York Times. It was a simple die-cast piece of plastic, cost you about less than $2 to make, and voila, you had a face shield. That design, somebody from the community that was involved in the project team went and partnered with Boyd Corp, and Boyd Corp had tracked about 181 million downloads of that design around the world. That's impact.
You know, I think the story there in terms of how different individual communities are kind of sharing knowledge, sharing capability, are strung together through like a shared sense, not just of purpose, but of capability, is such an interesting way of thinking about these, you know, ultimately crowdsourced ways of solving very, very serious problems. And it's encouraging to see how that can kind of cross different national boundaries and also different ethnic lines in terms of pursuit of something, you know, more important. That's a really encouraging story, not one that we normally get to talk to here on the Modern Industrialist. So I appreciate you bringing all this very tangible benefit to the audience here. How does a project get initiated now? We're a couple of years past. How are you seeing projects surfacing within the group? What kind of projects are people bringing to Helpful Engineering? And what's a good marker of a successful project for the Helpful Engineering community?
You know, I'm going to say, and people are going to find this strange, but we really thought quite a bit about this internally. I just gave you stories of impact. And if I really talk to you about impact told honestly, it's about a funnel of failure. Most organizations are going to reach for their success stories. We're going to do the opposite, because the honest shape of that impact is a funnel, and most of what enters the top purposely never reaches the bottom. And there's a myriad number of reasons for that, right? Let's look at some stats. As of today, we've got roughly 20,000 contributors mobilized. And when I say mobilized, they're in the community. That doesn't mean that 20,000 people are directly active. Let's say at its peak, we went from 20,000 to a core of around 400 odd people that really carried the pandemic surge. Together, they collated close to 1,000 ideas, of which became about maybe 100 launched projects. Of those 100, only around 10%, let's call it 10, reached a genuine design and prototype phase. A handful of those, maybe 5, produced a buildable design, and that's regardless of quality or engineering documentation. At the very bottom of those, at least 2 project teams spun off into their own independent nonprofits. So each focused on a specific product portfolio. Respira Works, which was a flagship, it built a low-cost open-source ventilator effort that grew from a California garage into a 120-plus person global team and won a $50,000 citrus grant on its way to manufacturing in Guatemala. Tetra did a lot of work, Project Tetra, and they spun off into a separate nonprofit, building a lot of different respiratory equipment for a variety of different use cases, from firefighting to manufacturing settings to other areas in the hazardous atmosphere, right? So if you read that the usual way, that's a roughly 98% failure rate. And while it sounds like an indictment, the usual way of reading it is wrong. Because when you're building safe, certifiable, manufacturable physical things, which is one of the hardest things a group of strangers can attempt, the honest truth is that most attempts die. It doesn't matter where the projects come from, right? The glamorous part is the demo. The real work is requirements, documentation, testing, maintenance, and convincing anyone to adopt what was built, and reality always gets a vote. So today, from a lot of the learnings that we had in the beginning, we've got about 4 or 5 different archetypes or persona of a project. Our focus is to be open source. We have our own pioneer projects, ideas that we sift through and we say, we're going to focus on these 2 or 3 projects that we're going to launch as our own, and we're going to invest time and momentum in driving. You'd have community projects where people from within the community come up and say, hey, listen, we have an idea and we need some help. And we be a supported project. A supported project means that, you know what, you tell us what you need. And the majority of the time, it's not money. People need other tangible things. They need mentorship, specialists, parts, support with building the prototype, CAD design, technical writers. In some cases, you just need leaders because they realize, look, I'm good at what I'm good at. I'm not good at leading a team, but I want to do something. And we've got an idea, but we need somebody to actually lead us. We need Sherpas. And the other element could be, you're a project that's already started outside helpful. And you say, listen, I really like what you guys are doing with the network effects of your ecosystem and your reach. You think you could be a supported project. That's one avenue. Then there's projects which are not open source or maybe open source, but don't want to become part of the helpful ecosystem as a project, but would love to benefit with some marketing support or some financial fundraising support. And we say, yeah, you could be a promoted project. You're doing good work. We want to help build this ecosystem out as far and wide as possible. Whether we benefit or not, it's about the maker community.
It's amazing to me, and I think it's such a great part of the story in terms of the scarcity and the crisis from the origin story, and how the need that you're fulfilling persists beyond that, because there's so many ancillary benefits that this open source approach has created, and there's just so many great commercial and industrial reasons for doing it this way. I want to pivot just a little bit. The pandemic certainly exposed just how fragile our supply chains can be. What you've also been working on is this idea of supply chain interoperability. And so I'd love to just spend a little bit of time on that in terms of what you realized in the context of the start of helpful engineering from a supply chain standpoint, and where you're kind of pressing now to push this initiative towards interoperability and what the benefits could be.
Yeah, so Project Data started as a supplementary activity to all the build work that was happening across these myriad number of projects around the world, saying, if we needed to help supply parts and components to any of these, how could we better understand the framework or the schema of making these things in a more consolidated fashion? There are ongoing initiatives such as The Internet of Production project, which looks at open know-how, open know-where, open know-what frameworks. How do you go and build something? How do you need to document it in a structured manner? And then what does that look like? So it's getting down to increasing layers of granularity. And, the pandemic didn't reveal just how hard it is to build things. It also revealed why so many of our builders kept hitting the same wall. The failures didn't die for lack of cleverness. They died at the seams. They had no manufacturing access, so they had no supply chain visibility. They had no way to coordinate across borders. And what the pandemic exposed wasn't just physical fragility in the global supply chains, it was informational fragility. Let's just look at the N95 mask. The N95 talks about a statistical level of quality embedded in the name, branded by 3M. How many different prototypes, generic variants of that did we see? And how many of them are actually N95? Precious few, right? If I need to build an N95 mask, well, it needs to be really, really tight. Okay, but now it's so tight I can't breathe. Fantastic. Nothing's getting in. But that wasn't the idea, right? How does it need to fit? Now it's cutting my ears off and I can't wear this all day, or I can't wear this, or it's steaming up my glasses. And all the various design elements are critical. Those nuances filter into the usability and reproducibility of that very design. The chain broke because we didn't have a shared communication layer between supply and the stakeholders depending on it. And when disruptions hit, the parties to a contract really had no real-time way to know that fulfillment was about to fail, let alone what to do instead. And that gap is exactly what the SKIS framework targets. It's not build more warehouses, but build that missing nervous system. We started developing it in collaboration with cyber physical systems leaders and academics at St. Joseph's University, the University of New Mexico, and the University of Toulouse, grounded in peer-reviewed work. We produced a green paper to accompany it. SKIS aims to notify the parties to a contract in real time when a disruption may derail the terms, recommend alternative fulfillment options that still meet the negotiated quantity, the spec, the timing, the price, and use AI and machine learning to turn those signals into action as quickly as possible. So the aspiration is a new paradigm for supply chains that's built on agility, transparency, and stakeholder trust and resilience. The word interoperability has now picked up across industry in a multitude of different ways. People are well conscious of this global north-south divide in the global supply chain. Everything from healthcare to defense, from the cloud to the different products that you use. The fact that you need to start thinking in a more modular fashion to ensure that things can work seamlessly with the least amount of friction has become more and more the critical competitive advantage for anything you want to design and build.
For supply chain leaders today, what are things that they can take from that framework or should be taking from that framework? Is it a focus on kind of preparation in terms of understanding the different options available to them and building that into their approach? Is it embracing techniques that'll make them more agile? Like, what do you think is a good takeaway for them or that they should be looking at in the documentation that's been done so far with SKIS?
A good start is to really dive deep into the data, to organize in a way that you understand your data better, right? You'll be surprised at how many organizations are so SKU heavy, but if you start to get down into the weeds to say, but do you fundamentally understand the substitutability of your own SKU network? The vast majority don't, because it's a legacy history of how SKUs have been built and designed, how the products have been built, different teams, different regions, different locations, to the point at which I can't tell you how much this pen or this mouse would cost if I had to rebuild it in another region or another country. I don't have the data to be able to do that. And in many cases, it's not that you don't have the data, it's that you haven't built a Rosetta Stone of how to read that data like for like. The other element here is to look at the design components with agility in mind always. The other aspect is, where do you hit the threshold of over engineering or over designing a component? And usually, if it gets to the point where I'm going to need to tweak at least 2 to 3 different things in order to make this design work, perhaps then I failed, right? Perhaps then I should be thinking about this as an easier block component that should not take me so long to just attach onto something else to get it to work with something else. Look at the data, look at your design ethos, take a good, long, hard look at the BOM associated with that to say, are we really tested all of the various material possibilities? And if so, how comfortable are we? Have we really made the best design choice here? If I've got too many different substitutes, then I should be thinking hard about what my main SKU is.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that replaceability, interoperability within the SKU data set is super interesting. And I think there's been, what I've heard is there's been an uptick in interest around graph databases as a way of kind of like managing that data, right? In a way that makes it relational and can give you a better picture of how those different pieces fit together. I think, in the wake of all the advances we've made in Gen AI, that appreciation for the graph database and relational understanding of things, I think, has caught up in the wake of that, right?
It has. It really has. And material science is going to be the natural evolution of what we're doing. The next revolution isn't going to be driven by AI. AI has already been that infrastructure layer that's here. The next one is going to be, how do you take things and transform them into atoms, into real things? So material science, to my mind, synthetic biology, those are going to be at the forefront of a lot of the future of engineering tomorrow. We were already working with other nonprofits like Jogel, just one giant lab based out of Paris, a sister organization that was also trying to do things as cleverly as possible with more of a synthetic biology background. But the concept is the same, right? Whether you're talking about a compound, whether you're talking about a piece of material, those principles are starting to come into light more and more as structure.
Yeah, I love that you brought up material science. Through our same common friends at the University of Illinois, I've been introduced recently to a lot of work that's happening in the quantum space. Right, there's a large quantum facility that's being developed on the south side of Chicago, and it's really been expanding my thinking around the opportunities there. Obviously, material science exploration is going to be a big one, as well as examining a lot of different ways to think about supply chain reliability and running more scenarios. Is quantum fitting on your aspirations and roadmap across the number of different things you're doing from a technology and industry standpoint?
It's definitely on the radar. One of the challenges you face, whether it's quantum or whether it's looking at the elements of compute, we're all in the same boat in that we're all running ourselves up against that same brick wall of the cost to compute. Now, Helpful isn't a organization that is going to invest in its own data centers tomorrow. We don't have the funds to do that. Even if you're working with vendors, that cost spiral is just going to continue to rise. But we do have a lot of people within our community that are diverse specialists and experts in this field. That's where Helpful as a platform can be the place to come to say, I have an idea, need some help fleshing it out. Can you help source people that I can talk to? Maybe it's a project that has legs and we can start up and stand up. Maybe it necessitates external partners and it needs a commercial entity. Maybe this is something that has to be hosted at your institution, but Helpful will be bringing a lot of knowledge and mind share through its volunteers and its people. And I think that's the other thing to remember. We're a community of volunteers. None of us is paid. I don't take a paycheck home, right? None of the board members are paid. It has been a sustained effort for 6 years post-pandemic, and we've branched out into other areas outside of healthcare. But it tells you something about how long the mission has sort of sustained itself through. Our intention and aspiration is to be the community platform that says, you know what, come here, talk to the ecosystem. Let's solve for this challenge.
Yeah. This has been great. I've got one question left that I'll get you out of here on. There's a lot of supply chain leaders, manufacturing leaders in our audience. In a couple sentences, what do you think is one shift in thinking that would be great for them to adopt? What's something that they could adapt their worldview around based on your experience?
Open engineering taught us that innovation is rarely the product of a lone genius, right? And more often, it's a result of ordinary people connected by purpose, contributing what they can, where they can, and when they can, and discovering that they are capable of far more than they imagined as part of anything that they started on doing. Helpful is a permissionless invention flywheel whose failures are the R&D, whose winners and commons repay that whole portfolio, and whose moat is the commons itself. That's a much longer game if you're looking at it from an investment thesis, but the return is options, talent, and ownership of a network that really is defining the next era of building. It's really about building builders rather than it is building projects.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great point to end on. I think we could all be doing a better job of encouraging building builders, because that's such a great source of innovation and advancement. I will tell our audience that you are a fantastic follow on LinkedIn. Your Friday food for thought always makes me smile and makes me think. So I'd encourage people to track you down on LinkedIn and get their weekly dose of that. Amish, thank you so much for the time today. Really enjoyed having you on. Thanks so much for sharing all of your experience and your stories from Helpful Engineering.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
I want to thank Amish for joining me and for sharing the story of Helpful Engineering. There were a few ideas from this conversation that really stood out. The first is that innovation doesn't always come from where we expect it to. The Helpful Engineering community includes professional engineers, students, retirees, operators, scientists, and people with no formal engineering background at all. What unites them is a willingness to contribute and solve problems. The second is Amish's observation that many of the supply chain challenges exposed during the pandemic weren't just physical problems, they were information problems. Organizations often lack the visibility and interoperability needed to respond when disruptions occurred. Finally, I keep coming back to his distinction between building products and building builders. Most organizations focus on the product. Helpful Engineering focuses on creating an environment where more people can become builders, contributors, and problem solvers. That's a powerful idea, especially at a time when technology is making it easier than ever for individuals to turn ideas into reality. Amish closed with a reminder that I think applies to all of us. Challenge your assumptions. Look for perspectives outside your usual circle, and make sure you're asking the right questions before you start searching for answers. If you'd like to learn more about Helpful Engineering, you can visit them at helpfulengineering.org. The Modern Industrialist Xchange podcast features candid conversations with the operators and innovators shaping the future of manufacturing, supply chain, and industrial services. As always, thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe so you don't miss our next conversation. We'll see you next time.